Hello everyone and welcome to Starscream's Ghost, a Transformers podcast, your episode-by-episode podcast guide through the classic Transformers Generation 1 cartoon and now Japanese anime continuity. I am Jeremy Graves, and joining me on our continuing adventures through the Japanese Transformers Headmasters series is of course my partner in crime. You could say at this point in the show, if I'm Zarak, he is clearly Galvatron. It is Mr. Andy Hanley. Good sir, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing very well. On this day of recording, I'd like to wish everyone a happy International Day of Happiness, apart from Daniel. He clearly, as we find out here, is not going to be happy. So
I will probably also add, well, I won't spoil everything for everyone in case you're not watching the show, but at this point, Zarak as well, probably not exactly happy with the way things have ended up.
yeah, not quite. For the first time, perhaps not quite gone to plan, but we are getting ahead of ourselves. So.
Indeed, but today, folks, what are we talking about? It is episodes 15 and 16 of Transformers Headmasters, with the following episode titles. Explosion on Mars, Scorponok appears. There's your first spoiler of the day. Then episode 16, Return of the Immortal Emperor. Which, not to spill the beans on this too early, Andy, but if you hadn't looked at the title card of this episode, you wouldn't frickin' know, would you?
yeah, they're not too worried about spoilers on that one. Which I kind of felt a bit stupid because I was like, I wonder what this is about. And then as soon as I saw that, like, oh, of course this is what it is about. Why did I think otherwise?
Yeah, I purposefully didn't mention it when we were sort of closing the last podcast, what exactly screenshot I saw. And as soon as I saw it, it's like, oh, okay, well, I think I know where this is going. But we will get onto that in due course. Quick bit of housekeeping before we get onto the first episode, folks. If you are a first-time listener, thank you very much for giving us the chance. We hope you enjoy the show, and if you do, why not tell a friend about the podcast? No matter, I should say, where you have found us. And of course, if you are watching the video version of the podcast on YouTube, first of all, hi YouTube, hope you're doing well. And if you would like to find the video version but have only found us in audio-only form, simply go onto YouTube, search for Starscream's Ghost Podcast. You should find our episodes just fine. And speaking of episodes, every single episode of Transformers Headmasters that we are watching is available on YouTube, but we will note that we are watching the old UK Metrodome DVD release, so subtitles and naming conventions will be following that accordingly. So without further ado, Andy, should we get straight on to episode 15, or do you have any general thoughts regarding the episodes today that you would like to impart upon our listeners?
I guess we really do need to get onto what's happening with Mars and Fortress for sure, because we left our own podcast on something of a cliffhanger. But yeah, I know these two episodes are sort of narratively functional, but with really important stuff that happens in them that kind of really punctuates them, was kind of my feeling. Like, I feel like we've had lots of way better, way punchier episodes, but in terms of like important introductions, shifting sands of things, these are two pretty big episodes that are, you know, while these two episodes are not kind of it's not really a 3-part story, it also kind of is, because this is very much, you know, much like a lot of the series has had, you know, a lot of it is direct continuation, but this is a very, you know, one episode begins literally as the other ends, so there's not any let up in what's going on here.
Yeah, I think we knew going in something big was going to happen in the first episode, just based on the title alone, quite frankly. But when we got to the second episode, it is pretty insane just how much happened. And potentially as well, little threads of stories that they've set up as well, as we'll get onto by the end of the show. And as you've already alluded to, Andy, what the hell is going to happen with Daniel's psyche when all is said and done?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we'll definitely get on to Daniel. I have things to say about Daniel.
Well, you know what then? Let's not wait any further. Let us begin today's proceedings with episode 15. Explosion on Mars. Scorponok appears. So we pick up the story right where we left off from the last podcast, so we encourage you to go back in our podcast archives to hear exactly what happened leading up to this moment in time. But we pick up the story on planet Athenia, where RC is desperately trying to contact Headmasters on Mars, with many other Autobots gathered with her, hoping to hear from their commander, that being Fortress. On the monitor in the control room, we see footage of Battleship Maximus, easy for me to say, on the surface of Mars. The narrator specifically saying, Fortress Maximus, depleted of energy, lies in a crater on Mars, motionless as though dead. And at this point, we, the viewer, then begin to see shots inside the battleship. The narrator continues. Moreover, the injured brainstorm and highbrow of the headmasters undergo medical treatment. The scene then changes again for us, the viewer. And then we begin to see footage of the underground tunnels, if you will. Meanwhile, the narrator continues, the Decepticons' scheme for destroying Mars proceeds as planned. At the Athenia base, the energy used to increase Fortress's power and the energy released during the destruction of Cybertron is identified as plasma energy. Now, there was a weird sort of... difficult to articulate, but there was a weird way that they phrased this in the subtitles that we had, where it sort of implied it was used to increase Fortress's power, which I'm not sure if that's technically correct, Andy, but it's a minor note and it's probably just a mini mistranslation. But the crux of the situation here now is that the Autobots have figured out plasma energy is actually a thing, which the Decepticons, Zarak specifically, was more than already aware of.
Yeah, and it's kind of it's an interesting state of affairs things are left in. Like, it's a pretty dire state where, like, a couple of the headmasters are out of action, Fortress is broken down, is waiting for the RAC to come and, you know, put some jump leads on him, you know, and give him a kick, push him down the hill and hope the engine starts. So yeah, like, things are pretty dire. Also kind of weird because, like, this episode sort of starts with, it seems like people trying to, like, get in touch with Fortress and they're not getting any response, and suddenly he's just like gives them a call and just like, no, it's fine, but I'm out of energy. And it's like, was he just not answering? Was he just not picking up? Like, was he leaving people on red? What's going on there?
Did he have his phone on Do Not Disturb, for example?
Yeah, he's probably like playing Wordle or something and not paying attention.
To continue with the notion about plasma energy, Spike, on inside Athenia base, I should say, deduces that the energy used against Fortress that drained him of his power was the plasma energy, and that was the same energy released in the destruction of Cybertron. RC realizing at this point, clearly we know what the Decepticons' goal is at this point, i.e. blow up Mars, generate more energy. So now everyone is on a level playing field when it comes to what is the actual end game here. We then see Fortress in communication with Spike about that theory of theirs. Alerted to this fact, the Autobot headmasters redouble their efforts to locate the Decepticons' bombing coordinates, and attack the Decepticon headmasters accordingly. Having been sent away during the climactic moments of the previous episode, where everyone was just evacuated off of Mars, the poor train bots are then told by Fortress, "Hey, come back here, need your help." So I bet they were thinking, "Oh, for crying out loud."
Yeah. It's like, I mean, this is what you get for being train robots, I guess. You're just always at people's beck and call.
Meanwhile, Zarak has been informed that the bombs have all been planted at the third location on Mars, because you'll remember, folks, from the previous episodes, there were 3 bombing locations, but only 2 had been set up. We also see this emphasized on a diagram showing us the rows of bombs that are tunneling towards the core of the planet. Now, quick note from me here when it comes to how we're going to recap this, and I'm sure you'll agree, Andy, that at this point in the episode, we cut back and forth between sort of various scenes happening. So if I sort of recap that as we went along, quite literally, it might get a tad bit confusing and perhaps a bit monotonous. So in an attempt, and I say attempt, Andy, to keep this as streamlined as possible, I'm going to try and focus on little segments of stories, just to kind of help recap them quicker. But for all I know, my notes may end up being exactly as I don't want them to be. So we will find out accordingly.
Yeah, we will see. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things about this episode that maybe makes it a little bit less compelling, because it has to jump around so much, and it doesn't always do it in the most graceful fashion. You know, it's not that it's hard to keep up with per se, but it's just you never really have much time to get your teeth into things before you move on to the next thing that's going on.
100% agree. And also, it's like a kind of just little sidebar discussion point at the moment. Given that we now know the state of play at the beginning of this episode, these past string of episodes and this gradual build-up to what Zarak's plan has been, it's made the Decepticons look really freaking powerful for once. Which, from everything we have gone through, from USG1 to what we've seen from Headmasters so far, this, I think, is the most powerful the Decepticons have ever looked in animated form.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's kind of the benefit of the structure of this series of having this longer overarching thing, because the problem when everything is episodic or even across 2 episodes, you know, you have to end with the Decepticons retreating. Like, that's kind of the entire point of the whole thing. So that means you've only got, like, at best, like, 10 minutes of the Decepticons looking good, then they get defeated. Whereas here, I mean, like, you know, we've had a good run of, like, 5-6 episodes where they always have the upper hand and they're slowly, like, building to stuff, or blowing up stuff, actually, more to the point. But, you know, there is that slow burn of, like, oh man, they've really got stuff together, and they're building towards something big, which, yeah, you never get to do in the US continuity, because even like 5 Faces of Darkness, which sort of goes part of that way there, but even that doesn't really have the time to kind of build that over a you know, concerted length of episodes.
Yeah, it is a fair point. And even when we occasionally got, say, you know, the multi-part episodes, they were perhaps 2 episodes at most, so it was maybe an episode where the Decepticons had the upper hand. But like you say, there wasn't this long overarching story, so it is really working out well at this point. And, I mean, I can't remember how many episodes that there are in total in Headmaster. I want to say it's around 32, so we're definitely around the halfway point of the series.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing in the US continuity that comes close is it Megatron's master plan? It's like, that's the 2-parter where they're blasting all of the Autobots into the sun, and like that has the really good midpoint of like, now we've done it, we just blasted all the Autobots into the sun. Look at us go. And you know, that was the only point I think in the entire kind of US run where you felt like, oh, they've won. What now? And yeah, the rest of the time it never reaches that kind of peak.
Yeah, when it came to Megatron's master plan, it was all because Cosmos was there.
Yeah. I mean, let us not forget that, you know, none of this would have happened if it wasn't for Cosmos. So.
Back to the story. As mentioned, we get a few quick scene transitions here, but first of all, the Autobots are trying to figure out how to stop Zarak's plan. This leads us to them seeing on a radar the ability to locate the bombs that they have to find. They end up detecting one being guarded by the Terracons, and they are in front of a large structure, which turns out is indeed one of the bombs. This leads to Chromedome and Hardhead going to investigate, but they then meet all 3 Decepticon Headmasters en route, and the 3 of them figure, well, this is a perfect chance to actually just off our foes. And given that they were also hit by the plasma energy, that being the Autobots, and they're probably still feeling the effects from that a bit, the writing is on the wall here. They need to take advantage of this moment. We get a small scuffle involving the 2 sides, which prompts Wheelie, because, you know, Wheelie, the arbiter of encouragement from Planet Athenia, watching on a monitor. He's watching the action unfold, of which, Andy, we've never actually talked about how good the secret cameras are that the Transformers have to be able to keep seeing all these scenes, but maybe a debate for another day. But Andy, Wheelie's encouraging fighting words as he's seeing this action unfold. What's going on? They're beating us!
Yeah, which again is kind of a bit of an overarching theme in these episodes of Wheelie just being like, maybe we suck. Like, maybe we're just really bad and we just keep losing. Maybe we're just not any good. And yeah, this is very much the starting point of that.
This prompts, I should say, not that exact line of dialogue, but this circumstance, if Wheelie had that much power, flippin' heck, but this circumstance prompts Fortress to contact Athenia and requesting RC to send the train bots back to Mars, as we talked about a few moments ago. Now, I wanted to note this again, Andy, because we actually got to see a more detailed version of the train bot's transformation into, like, multi-carriage train, which I really got a kick out of. It was really well done and just looked super cool.
Yeah, that was an interesting one because we've talked about some of these scenes in the past where it's like, okay, this is reusable footage. This is a transformation scene they can use over and over, and maybe this is, but this one felt a bit less so because it's very much like in situ on Athenia, I think, is where that happens, and it's like it doesn't. This felt like it's just like, no, we're just doing it for this episode, and it's like, oh, okay. I mean, I guess the request has really come through from HQ to push these toys, so here we are.
The train bots arrive on the scene as the fight between the two headmasters the two headmaster sides, excuse me. I'm doing good with my words today, everybody. Apologies. But basically, the crux of it is the Decepticon headmasters have got the upper hand, which we don't get to see too often, quite frankly. But the train bots arrive, they transform into Raiden, and they literally just punch all three Decepticon headmasters in one shot, which was a wonderful moment and a brilliant visual.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of the joys which you actually don't get very often, where you get the big kind of Gatai robot just punching out or beating smaller non combiner robots. Like it's usually set up to make sure the combiner teams fight each other, and this is just like, no, we're just gonna punch the little guy, so deal with it.
And also, for once, Andy, a combiner not looking weak.
Yeah, this is also nice to see.
If on your bingo card you had that, everybody, that's a rare one you can check off.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, funnily enough, this is an absolute sidebar, but I was reading, I think it's the tfraw.com website, put up a bunch of really interesting notes that Hasbro had kind of passed to the writing and the production team, and some of it absolutely matched stuff we've talked about on this podcast. There was one very specific one of just hey, you really need to get the Predacons into this episode. We don't really care how, but they're the hot new toy. Please just get them in any way you can, and use them as much as possible in future episodes. So you can see a lot of the exact stuff that we've talked about throughout this series, where suddenly particular character turns up every week for a few weeks and is super powerful, and then suddenly they're not very important anymore, so suddenly they're not very powerful and they get beaten by whoever the new robot that Hasbro want to sell is.
Yeah, we've had that theory quite a few times, and one would assume, Andy, there must have been something important going on in Japan, because in these two episodes, we see a heck of a lot of Transformers.
Yes, yeah. I mean, this does feel like... I guess because it's... Scorponok appears, spoilers for this episode. This does feel like they've coalesced quite a lot around that of well, this is the big reveal of this character / toy. So while we've got people's attention, this is maybe a good time to bring a whole bunch of others around and, hopefully boost sales across the board.
Back to the story. So as mentioned, Raiden has just punched out the three Decepticon headmasters, but they're actually not completely done and out and start to continue fighting when Zarak communicates to them to pull out of the fight and retreat. The Autobots, understandably, are pretty confused by this because they have no idea what's going on. But then they quickly remember, right, priority, where the heck are the bombs, and start to put their attention on that. During all of this, there is a quick cutaway to another location where we hear Zarak specifically say, "Soon my transector will be completed. Just wait and see, Fortress." Now, I bring this up, Andy, because per the TF Wiki, he actually relocated to planet Zarak at this point, which is not properly indicated, I don't think, in this episode. You kind of figure it out when it comes to the big crescendo moment, but it's not actually properly indicated where he is. So I thought it was worth noting at this point.
Yeah, I wonder whether there's a deleted scene or something that got cut out of the script there, because, that is not made entirely clear, and it feels like it probably should have been had they had the time to do so.
We then see Fortress contact Ultra Magnus, yes everybody, he's still in the show, who is still in command of the Autobot City Metroplex base on Earth. The conversation results in Twincast being dispatched to spy on the Decepticon base on Earth to learn just what the heck the villains are up to, quite frankly. And given the sudden retreat on Mars, this notion is heightened. In a very random, fun twist, we get to see a couple of the Autobot cassette tapes sort of work together and try and gain entry inside the Decepticon base. It's Rewind that goes in because Steeljaw attacks the Decepticons on the outside guarding. I was not expecting, Andy, to see 2 of the Seeker jets again, which specifically was Dirge and Thrust, which was a good little callback, but I just totally forgotten they were a thing at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this is more of like I've lost track of who's supposedly dead and who isn't. I mean, as we mentioned on the last podcast, like there was some random Jazz appearance during one of the episodes. So yeah, some of these guys, I feel like maybe it's like when you kind of semi-retire and you just come in like one day a week to help out at the company you used to work for. Maybe this is what the Seeker Jets are doing. They're kind of semi-retired, but it's like, I'll come in on a Thursday because I've not got a lot else to do. So I'll just hang out and help you guys out every now and again.
I like the fact that they're just still on Earth. They've been there for a while now, so...
Yeah, I mean, they've got a place, got a mortgage there, not going to move.
Now, I did actually do a little bit of digging on this, because as soon as I saw them, it's like, I have to know what's going on. And then I remembered, Andy, something we talked about in the first podcast relating to Japanese Headmasters, which kind of reminded me, I'm not really going to be able to get a proper answer for this, but I thought it was good just to kind of reset the bar for us, as it were. And at this point, given that we're about halfway through the show, where things are at continuity-wise. As we've talked about before, don't forget that technically, this Japanese G1 continuity as a whole that we are now in, it's not just post-season 3 that we're talking about, i.e. that the Rebirth episodes didn't happen. It's also, Andy, the fact that Transformers the movie, technically in Japanese continuity, had not taken place and or had not been released in Japan. And we documented before how during sort of the opening of the Headmasters series in Japan specifically, there was a little sort of video montage package explaining a few things that had happened and whatnot and such before. So because of that, technically the Seeker Jets and whatnot were kind of reformatted by Unicron, I think. But that technically hasn't happened in this continuity, despite Unicron technically having been a thing in Season 3. But at this point, I'm just going to say it's really cool to see them. Yeah.
I mean, who at this point, the line between kind of like production error and actual legitimate timeline are so blurred that who can say anything? Well, what about Blur? Where's he gone? Anyway.
Well, I can tell you where he's gone. He's with Rodimus.
Yes, this is true. But where?
Literally where? Sorry. So as mentioned, Rewind sneaks into the base and watches as Sound Blaster informs the Decepticon ninja Sixshot on a video call that Zarak has, quote-unquote, ordered us all immediately back to Char. And after he reports back to Twincast outside the base, that being Rewind, I should be more specific, Twincast opts to follow the Decepticon ninja through what I wrote down, Andy, as a classic-style space bridge, because I miss seeing those on Earth.
Yeah, I was really happy to see that back, because that sort of it feels like a deep cut at this point in time, because, we've not really seen much actual... Everyone just flies everywhere. It's like, why? You've got a space bridge that you can just teleport places. I mean, I realise it blows up on the regular, because it never seemed to work all that well. But, you'd have thought by now they'd just be space bridging all over the place.
We then cut to Char, where it turns out a meeting is taking place, so it's a good job that Twincast decided to follow. We cut to Char, and a bunch of Decepticons had gathered, the narrator saying the following. Meanwhile, at their base on Char, chief members of the Decepticons assemble. I wanted to mention that because, per what the narrator just said, Andy, and who was on screen, the chief members of the Decepticons, if there is any kind of ranking system at this point, is Astrotrain, the Predacons, the Terracons, Sound Blaster, Blitzwing, and Sixshot.
Yeah, there's that. I mean, we get a good bit of Blitzwing in this episode, which may be my own kind of like confirmation bias of toys that I once owned, but like I was like, quite a lot of Blitzwing now. Like, remember when he tried to take over the Decepticons in that football stadium? Like those days are long gone. Clearly,
I was going to say they don't.
Yeah, exactly. Probably for the best, for multiple reasons.
So, something that amused me greatly is that Sixshot was summoned from Earth to go to Char for a meeting, which it turns out was a Zoom call to somewhere else to talk to Zarak.
I mean,
it was slightly counterproductive.
We've all had one of those. Like, you know, you go into the office and it's like, oh, we could have just done this on Zoom because everyone else is remote. And then you think, well, I could have just stayed at home. Six could have just stayed at home in his pajamas and taken this meeting, but no, he had to get out, get up early, get the Astro train into Char, and what a waste of time.
We also see Twincast sneaking into the room in the background, not that anybody notices. On the monitor where Zarak is talking to his comrades, we see planet Zarak light up bright white. And then we see a giant silhouette of something we've never seen before, unless you've paid attention to the opening title sequence during the first 14 episodes, but we will disregard that for now. And then it appears in front of planet Zarak. Then, with the giant shadow on screen, we hear Zarak say, "At last, it is finished. My work of art, Scorponok." A fun note, actually, that in Japanese, this is known as Mega Zarak.
Yeah, which I do. As good a name as Scorponok is, Mega Zarak is also a really good name, especially when it's just like the robot that you built to like house yourself. It's like, yeah, why not? Why not?
Yeah, so just to kind of highlight this now, folks, again, we're sticking with sort of the language definitions that we've got in our subtitle script on the DVD. But if at any point you kind of hear me kind of interchange the two names, it's probably just because of a mix of me looking at the TF Wiki for some notes and maybe making my own notes. I'm just saying that up front. So, Andy, I'm going to ask you now, if I happen to do that, feel free to throw out just a quick clarification note so there's no confusion.
Absolutely. I mean, I would just enjoy hearing people say Mega Zarak occasionally, so it's fine.
Talking about fun things that people say, did you notice in the Japanese dialogue, because the subtitle said, "My work of art, Scorponok," did you actually hear what Zarak said in the dialogue?
I can't recall, to be fair.
He described it as being great mode.
I mean, also true.
So we've had big mode for Fortress Maximus and now great mode for Mega Zarak / Scorponok. So I'm all about this.
This is like a school playground thing of like, well, my robot's got big mode, well, mine's got great mode. Like, well, mine's got best mode. Well, mine's got best mode infinity. So
Infinity +1.
Exactly. Yeah. It's just this is maybe where this series is going to end with like Mega Zarak Infinity +1.
We then see Weird Wolf, Mind Wipe, and Skull Cruncher outside of Scorponok on planet Zarak. And they're also stunned by what they see. They then step inside the giant transector because a door conveniently opens up for them. They head up to the bridge, and then we see the back of a not shadowy figure sitting on a chair. The chair turns around, and finally, Andy, we get to see Zarak. He's got a body that's yellow and kind of has brown, reddy-like arms. And he tells his comrades, "You are about to see something even more amazing."
I've got to say, as a reveal of like how Zarak looks, I mean, I kind of expected this because of the toy, but it's like, oh man, that's kind of underwhelming.
Isn't
like,
it just?
You've bigged yourself up with all these fog machines and this, that, and the other, and now you're like, here I am, and it's just like, oh, you're just this little guy. It's like, you know, that's maybe a bit of a disappointment.
It's like, you know, a couple episodes ago, you had literal fire around your body, looking like a Super Saiyan.
Yeah. I mean, now we know he was compensating for something, so it all makes sense.
The other assembled Decepticon forces on Char are still watching through the view screen, and then we see the surface of planet Zarak begin to crack, and the entire planet effectively just explodes. It's like, how many planets are we going to see explode in this show? Maybe that should just be the bingo card now, Andy. How many? Yeah. Like, if you had an exploding planet, check.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly, and I mean, again, getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Like, this continues to be a threat, as it turns out. So, you know, we might not be done with planets blowing up yet.
So, from the core of the planet emerges Scorponok's secret project. Zarak, I should say. Sorry, let me clarify. Actually, no, wait. Yeah, I'm just going to say Scorponok now, Andy. It's going to be far easier than me trying to figure this out. So, from the core of the planet emerges Scorponok's secret project, his own, what the TF Wiki aptly described as colossal transector. Now, interestingly, occasionally on screen when they introduce a new character, and this happens a lot in anime in general, but you'll get sort of some on-screen text highlighting, this is who this character is. They actually refer to this particular appearance of Scorponok as Decepticon City, because it is something akin to Autobot City, and that becomes a lot clearer as this episode goes on, Andy, but I really liked that as a little sort of note and continuity point.
I mean, the only note I made for this was poor Triptychon. It's just like, I wonder if anybody sent him, like, his P45 or whatever, his demotion to say, like, I'm sorry, you're no longer Decepticon City, because we've got a big new Decepticon City, and he's also a scorpion, not a dinosaur, which I guess we've decided is better. Because it's like, yeah, you can't do this. Like, you've already got a Decepticon City. Like, this is unfair.
But then immediately, the ante is upped even more as we see the Decepticon City transform into a gigantic robot scorpion. The narrator specifically saying, revealed for the first time, Zarak's Transector, Scorponok. Changing to mobile combat mode, it sets off for Planet Char. So I like the fact, really early on here, we've got established that it turns into a base, Decepticon City, but there's also this Scorpion mode, which is kind of like a travel version, as it were. It's like their travel vehicle, their own spaceship, which at this point makes me wonder how many other Decepticons are just going to be obsolete by the end of this episode.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, like sorry, Astro Train, etc., as well. Yeah, it's a slightly weird imagery of like Scorpion mode, Scorponok just kind of going warp speed and flying around, because it's like, I feel like that's a little, I feel like all the other continuities are very much like the city mode is kind of like more of a flying base, and then the Scorponok mode is like the kind of land mode. So yeah, it's kind of a slightly curious decision. Also really interesting, just like the design of Scorponok in this cartoon is like basically like a one-to-one model of the actual toy. Like, they've not taken any embellishments or taken anything sort of away from that, because if you look at like the G1 comics, like the toy and Scorponok here has this like visor that comes down over his entire like face, whereas like G1 comic Scorponok, they always removed that and had him just have a normal face that was fully visible. And it's kind of interesting because the cartoon usually does similar whenever the toys have slightly weird faces or designs, they kind of make them a bit more natural and a bit more, relatable, I guess, is a weird turn of phrase to use, but that's the closest I can find. Whereas this, they've just gone like, yeah, this is what the toy looks like, this is what Scorponok is going to look like in this show.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I honestly wasn't aware of all the history you just said, but I did think that the actual depiction of Scorponok in this one looked really freaking cool, and like you said, was very close to the toy. Admittedly, I didn't go back and check, but was this vastly different from like the US season 4 version, from what you recall?
I'm trying. Yeah, because I feel like that was definitely. Yeah, I think like Scorponok in that just had a normal face. I don't think they went down the visor route with that one either. I feel like that was always sort of the standard for him, non-toy. So yeah, it really stood out to me. It's just like, oh, this is. I went and looked up the toy because I was like, oh yeah, this was exactly what the toy looked like, right? And yeah, it absolutely is.
Now, I will ask now, Andy, based on what you were saying on the last podcast about Fortress Maximus, was there anything included in the Japanese toy of Scorponok that wasn't in, like, the Western version?
I mean, yeah, I've not looked. I'm assuming not, because, I mean, unless he's going to get a big old sword or something as well at some point, then yeah, I'm guessing that was just a Fortress Maximus thing. I mean, he's a big scorpion. What more do you need to sell the toy, I guess?
Fair. Absolutely fair. So with that being said, back to the story. As the Decepticons on Char are off to prepare for Lord Zarak, as they refer to him at this point, that becomes crucial in about an episode or so's time, Sound Blaster spots Twincast hiding, and we get a brief scuffle between the two just the two just Transformers. I don't know what I was trying to think of there. I thought of a word, couldn't think of it, so I stopped. But we got
the two cassette players, basically.
There you go. Yeah. I'm just going to carry on. I'm just going to leave that all in the edit. I'm not fussed.
Yeah, that's fair. Also, it should be said, like, it's been quite a while since we had the, like, Twin Car Sound Blaster beef hour. They don't really make a lot of it here. Like, I thought this was going to be a big rekindling of that rivalry, but it was a bit more of a just quick shooting match, and then off we went. I guess again there was maybe too many other fish to fry, but like, because that was such a big deal earlier in this season, like, you know, the whole what became of Soundwave and Blaster, and now that's just very much water under the bridge, and everyone seems to have forgotten about it.
I did like the fact that I don't think we've seen it maybe since season 2 of Transformers, but I like the fact that we got Sound Blaster turning into cassette deck mode and literally utilizing sound waves to attack his opponent. I missed that, because I'm pretty sure that happened in one episode.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely been a thing that I think they've both done at some point. But
it's the one where Soundwave was a nightclub owner.
Yes. Oh, those heady days.
I want to say it was Auto Bop. That's the episode name that springs to mind.
Mm-hmm. That's the one. Very good episode name as well.
I know, right? There you go. Bring back Auto Bop. Anyway. So we get a brief scuffle between the two, but ultimately Twincast is able to get away, and Sound Blaster is none too pleased. But trying to figure out where Twincast went to is going to have to wait, because Scorponok arrives and lands on Char, and after transforming back into Decepticon City in the process. Sound Blaster informs him, that being Scorponok, that all preparations on Char Base, as he refers to it, are complete. Which I won't lie, Andy, I immediately thought of, you're not going to blow up Char, are you? That's the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, I mean, why not at this point? You know, just once you've got a taste for it, it's just, well, any planet will do.
A short time later, we see Decepticon City transform back into Scorpion mode Scorponok, and then it heads for Mars. But there is even more to Scorponok at this point that is revealed, as the narrator says, quote-unquote, Scorponok changes into transport mode and sets a course for Mars at warp speed. And we then see the Scorpion form of Scorponok sort of change visually into something which I've described, Andy, as kind of like a kaleidoscope of colours. It was the only way I could think to describe it, and then just disappear in a beam of light. So we also now know that Scorponok is a freaking warp ship as well. Zarak's really done his homework here.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they've really taken the, like, please sell this toy to the kids to heart. Of just like, well, what can we get him to do? Like, well, he's got warp speed. He's a city. I don't know. He's got infinite money inside him. I don't know. Like, what else can we have Scorponok do?
We then cut back to Mars. The narrator saying, meanwhile, Fortress has received Twincast's report about Zarak's transector. So the time has come for a final showdown with Zarak. Zarak, somehow I will transform and crush you, says Fortress, the Autobot leader, who clearly knows the odds are well and truly stacked against him. But then he receives word from Chromedome that they have found the bombing coordinates they were trying to figure out. And then we cut to a firefight immediately between the Autobot Headmasters and the Trainbots as Raiden, teaming up against the Terracons, both as their individual selves and then eventually their combined form as Abominus. However, the Terracons / Abominus do not have to wait long for assistance, because Scorponok appears in the skies. And, quite frankly, the Headmasters and the Trainbots are still continuing to battle, but they know something's about to happen, quite frankly. Battleship Maximus, however, is still completely drained of energy and is unable to transform. Fortress isn't even leaving, but at this point, as it's kind of established later in the episode, it's because he's really just refusing to leave Battleship Maximus because he just, captain goes down with a ship kind of mentality. So that's more the reason as opposed to just not helping.
Yeah, for sure. I also, it's quite curious the way he sort of refers to it as like a final showdown, because it's like, has nobody told you how many more episodes of this you're contracted for? Because we're not there yet, my friend.
That said, though, with the way this was just ramping up, that part of me did think, is someone else gonna die here?
Well,
it feels like it's building like that.
Yeah. I mean, it certainly doesn't. And again, like, even with the whole, like, you know, we're gonna blow up Mars thing, you know, we thought that wasn't going to happen with Cybertron, and then it did. And so, yeah, like, the stakes are super high at this point. And again, even, yeah, like, characters that have died or disappeared, you know, it feels like nothing is off the table. I mean, apart from maybe, like, blowing up Scorponok, that was maybe off the table. But, like, yeah, it felt like there was a lot of... it's a good thing about this series. It feels like it has a very large possibility space in terms of what could happen. So you're never entirely sure.
Back to the story. Zarak orders the Decepticon headmasters to get to the bombing site, get it prepped, and then proceeds to make Scorponok smash its way, quite literally, through the Autobot headmasters and train bots, using its scorpion tail laser for the first time, and then also, quite frankly, Andy, just clobbering both teams. So much so, it clobbered Raiden, and just the force of the blow just separated all of them into their individual forms. It was quite a sight.
Yeah, it was very satisfying to see, to be honest. I did enjoy that.
Scorponok then heads to Battleship Maximus, and we get a line of dialogue, Andy, which is either going to make things incredibly confusing from here on out, or it's simply going to reinforce the direction we are going in when it comes to naming conventions. Because, per our subtitle script, Zarak says, "My name is no longer Zarak. I am Scorponok."
yeah, just when you thought it couldn't get any more complex.
Which I would guess that means that in Japanese he said, "I am no longer Scorponok, I am Mega Zarak."
Yes, yeah, I mean, that's clearly, yeah, I don't know. Whichever way you spin it, it's a really bizarre turn of events, to be honest.
But through the dialogue that follows, Andy, we actually get some answers as to why Zarak has got beef with Fortress, or I should say Scorponok at this point. He says, "Fortress, now you are going to pay for kicking me off Planet Master. Let's go, Scorponok." So we've sort of mused that thinking in, I think, the previous couple of podcasts now, Andy, but we finally got it confirmed that that is indeed what happened. So it seems then that, we'll just call him Zarak for the moment, but it seems that Zarak clearly was an Autobot and then got kicked off and became Decepticon.
Yeah, well, yeah, or I mean, maybe not, and he just literally got, you know, kicked off the planet, you know, in a more literal sense. I mean, I'm hoping that this is the setup for, like, a backstory episode or chunk of an episode that goes into a bit more detail on that and how it happened and what the whole deal was. Because, you know, we've had sort of Fortress's origin story and the Autobot Headmaster's origin story, but as we've mentioned before, we've not really had a lot on the Decepticon side, so maybe somebody can fill in some of the blanks on that as we get deeper into the series.
As the Scorpion robot progresses towards Battleship Maximus, excuse me, we then get the reveal, Andy, that there's also a robot mode, which you sort of already alluded to, but there is a third transformation on this robot. No wonder they wanted to frickin' sell this toy, because they did it all in this episode. It transforms into a big robot and just begins pounding on Battleship Maximus, just the completely helpless and dead craft. The narrator's dialogue, putting it quite bluntly and quite eloquently, I thought as well, Andy. "With no energy to respond to the onslaught, Fortress is at Scorponok's mercy."
Yeah.
Then the report comes in that all the bombs have been put in place, and Scorponok orders Sound Blaster to detonate them. We start to see explosions occur, the narrator saying, "Suddenly, the plasma explosives planted at the north and south poles of Mars are simultaneously detonated. Then the underground plasma bombs ignite and explode one after the other." Scorponok then says, "Fortress, can you hear that? The whole place is going to blow up. You'll get no more energy. You'll be blasted to the heavens. Farewell." The Decepticons begin to pull out and not necessarily retreat, but getting out of the explosion's way, quite frankly. The The planet is just, it's erupting, explosions all around, flames beginning just to engulf the planet. But as the Autobots go to try and help their commander escape and abandon Battleship Maximus, as already alluded to, Fortress refuses to do so. But then, when all appears lost, suddenly some readings start to move about on the console in front of them, the computer console. And Battleship Maximus has suddenly got some energy. And it turns out that the battleship has absorbed some of the plasma energy being released from the initial explosions of planet Mars. We then cut to space, where Scorponok looking on with joy, and realizing he has destroyed Fortress and Mars. And then we see the planet engulfed in flames. But suddenly, the transformed Fortress Maximus emerges from the destruction and explosions, Master Sword in hand. Scorponok not fully grasping that he's the one that actually caused this, so his plan's actually technically backfired a bit. But that's a debate for another moment. Fortress Maximus immediately heads straight for the giant Scorponok robot, and then just with the Master Sword, just swipes at his shoulder. And at that moment, forces the villains to retreat. We then see RC, Daniel, Spike, and Wheelie looking on from their very powerful monitor on planet Athenia, happy to see their friends are unharmed. The narrator then says, "Calamity has been avoided, but Fortress is saddened by his inability to save Mars." And then, just after the narrator speaks, Andy, we hear Fortress say to himself, "Forgive me, Daniel." Because he realizes he broke his promise to Daniel to save Mars. To which my first thought was, you Headmasters aren't very good at keeping promises, are you?
Yeah,
based on what we've seen.
Don't make promises you can't keep. I mean, that is I like this as an ending to the episode, but it's also it kind of feels weird because Fortress seems quite pleased with himself, of like, haha, look at me, I've got energy now. It's like, yes, but the entire planet blew up. I mean, this is not really, I'm not putting this down as a W. This is not a win for you, really. So it feels like a very empty victory at the end of the day.
Yeah, and just to sort of round off the episode notes, and then we can sort of go back over what we saw, as it were. The narrator actually then kind of emphasizes the Headmaster's mindset at this point, because the narrator says the Headmasters now burn with hatred for Scorponok. And I'm thinking, oh, wow, we're getting serious now, are we?
Yeah.
Better late than never.
Yeah. They were only mildly annoyed at him before, but now they really don't like him.
But then the episode closes proper with a shot of Battleship Maximus flying away from planet Mars. And in the background, we see the giant explosion in the distance as the remnants of Mars is just slowly fading away into nothing. So now, planet Mars has been destroyed. And one of the big questions leaving that, obviously, is what the heck's going to happen next? But also, how's this going to sort of upset the stable of balance, as it were, in the solar system? Because that was something that had been talked about, that there's sort of like a planetary alignment, if you will, the balance. So that's a big question coming out of this, but that is how the episode ends. But not to just sort of jump to TF Wiki notes yet, Andy, because I haven't given you a chance to actually talk about your thoughts on it. So that whole closing section of Battleship Maximus receiving some energy, Scorponok and co flying away, admiring their handiwork, and then the swipe with the Master Sword from Fortress Maximus. I really enjoyed that whole thing, as slightly absurd as it kind of is. But what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it works really well as kind of the setup for where we go next, because again, it's not, and again, this is very different from the classic kind of US cartoon episodes where, like, hey, the Autobots win and everything's okay, everything's great now, like, you know, the Decepticons have been defeated, yay. Whereas this is, you know, far more of a like, yeah, okay, they kind of won part of this battle, but also an entire planet got obliterated, and that might have a lot of repercussions, and there's a lot of work to be done here, because, you know, at best they've staved off the absolute worst case scenario, but there's still a lot at play. So I do really like that. Again, that ongoing continuity is really helpful for this series that, you know, you don't just have a reset to 0. There are kind of ongoing stakes. So I do really like it for that. It does just feel a little bit clumsy and contrived of just like, well, we have to have like an upside to this. And we have to make sure. It almost felt like they'd written themselves into a corner of like, oh god, like, well, if we're going to blow up the planet, then Fortress is going to blow up as well. And it's like, well, I don't know, I'll have to make it so that his iPhone charges just in time to send the important email or whatever. And so, yeah, it works though. And it's also, again, the animators, I feel like just really enjoying animating explosions, because like the moment when all the detonators charge in Mars is actually really super cool. Like it's a really good effect of this like chain reaction of explosions that are just kind of bisecting the planet. And that's just like that was like my visual highlight of the day, of just like, oh, that was really awesome. I liked that. And even actually, like, you know, Fortress kind of appearing out of this huge explosion, like that was just a really good visual moment of how all of that panned out.
Yeah, it was very good fun. Now, I do want to sort of re-emphasize that the state of play in terms of how powerful the Decepticons are, as like you said, a little bit clumsy as it was in this particular episode, certain things that occurred, how powerful the Decepticons are is pretty damn impressive. And that's obviously without even Galvatron having been there. Arguably, they've got better since Galvatron was gone. So it's just, you know, what the heck? That kind of maybe is a state of play of maybe the whole Megatron Galvatron thing actually was the weak link.
Yeah, well, and I mean, again, that sets things up really interestingly in terms of this sort of ongoing storyline. Because, again, US cartoon, there are plenty of episodes where someone's like, I can do a better job than Galvatron, but it all has to be wrapped up in an episode, and, you know, it never really gets very far. Whereas this has a far bigger overarching, I mean, just having kind of Zarak make sense as sort of the rival in that form, but, like, you know, you've got these two powerhouses, you know, that are, you know, potentially going to be at loggerheads very soon, and, you know, that is a really interesting thing that it can play with, like, week on week in a way that's far above kind of, you know, Starscream being snarky about Megatron on the regular or whatever.
You aren't wrong about that. So yeah, I really enjoyed the episode as a whole, but do you have any additional notes that you noted, good sir, before we get onto some TF Wiki notes, which I'm going to imagine there's going to be a lot.
yeah, let's see what they got.
So, notes from the TF Wiki website. Continuity notes. This episode represents the culmination of various plot threads that have been running throughout the Headmasters series thus far. 1. Having remained hidden in the shadows since his debut in the 4 Million Year Old Veil of Mystery episode, Scorponok finally steps into the light in this episode. That Scorponok reference being Zarak, but you know what I mean at this point. The construction of Zarak's transector was foreshadowed back in Rebellion on Planet Master and brought to the fore alongside the Decepticons' activities, on Planet Zarak in the Shadow Emperor Zarak episode. The fate of the beast former slaves who were forced to construct it remains unclear at this point. Actually, it doesn't even say at this point. I added that. It just says remains unclear. So I guess just make a judgment for yourself. The power of plasma energy was introduced in The Dormant Volcano Mysteriously Erupts, its origin tied back to the events of the Cybertron is in Grave Danger 2-parter. It's not unfair to say that with the wrapping up of these story points, the series becomes largely directionless. Oh, alright. Well, okay. With the events of the next episode, I've sort of changed the wording so as to not give away everything, it launches a very random planet-hopping story arc that serves no real purpose, but to vary the scenery until something else significant occurs, which I won't say out loud now so as to not spoil ourselves, occurs later on. So that's interesting. I kind of didn't want to know that in a way, but I'll be interested to see how that actually unfolds.
Yeah, well, I guess at least we know what to prepare for now. And yeah, that honestly feels like a very typical like anime arc where we've reached that like what I always call the saggy middle of a series where, you know, they've got episodes to fill, and so yeah, you have a bunch of kind of somewhat unrelated stories that are, you know, yeah, like a bit planet hoppy or whatever. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that pans out at least.
Trivia notes. When the Autobots first learn of Zarak's plan to blow up Mars, their reaction is one of horror. They also mention the incredible damage the Mars detonation will surely bring to Earth, which is made even more direct by a series of still images showcasing the potential destruction. Yet, when Mars actually is blown up, the Earth seems to go off without any danger whatsoever. So, okay then.
Yeah, it is, because that's sort of what I was expecting, was that we were going to have a bit of a sort of peril of like, now we need to blow up some big rocks heading for Earth or something. But yeah, it seems like at this exact point in time, it seems like, it's no big deal really. But that does also raise a point. A thing this series is really enjoying doing is it's like what if scenarios where it imagines, like, there's a point, I can't remember if it's this episode or next, where it's like, I think it's Scorponok just imagining just basically killing like Fortress, and there are a few of those throughout of just like, where again the animators get to have fun of just like, oh, we can draw the thing that we'll never actually be allowed to do because we can make it like, but this could happen, and that's always kind of fun.
Another trivia note here following up on Mars. The loss of Mars isn't much of a big deal throughout the rest of the series either. They add here, the Autobots don't even bother to update their space maps to reflect its destruction when travelling through the Mars-Jupiter asteroid belt.
Wow, it's expensive updating your maps, I guess. That's fine.
They didn't get the new firmware yet on their computer.
Yeah, exactly.
Foreign localization. The Omni Productions dub episode title for this was Mars Explodes, the Scorpion Appears.
That's pretty good.
Which is alright in fairness, all things considered.
Yeah, it's kind of, like it is, especially, I don't know, if you didn't know, it doesn't give everything away by just name dropping Scorponok entirely, so I quite like that.
The Shout Factory subtitle script has the episode title being the same, minus one exclamation mark being in the right place. So, there are a couple of additional notes on this. The review of the last episode shown before the title card is omitted. Okay, so fine. Mm-hmm. Okay, right, here we go. This might get a bit confusing, but just roll with me. I'm going to read this verbatim, so you might have to sort of change this around in your head, folks, as you're listening to it. The Mega Zarak Transector is referred to as the Scorponok Transector, despite the Headmaster himself already being named Scorponok. The Destron City mode of the Transector is subtitled as Decepticon Headquarters.
Okay.
Some interesting choices there, but... So, got a couple of other language titles here. I'm going to give you the choice to decide the order, Andy. Would you like Mandarin, Russian, or Italian first?
I feel like the Russian one's going to be the one to go for here.
Okay. Simply, Explosion on Mars, Scorponok appears.
Okay, well...
So, in Mandarin, it was Mars explodes, Scorponok appears. And in Italian, it was The Destruction of Mars, Lord Zarak appears. Which technically is correct per some dialogue in the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do actually like that point because, I mean, in all of the other continuities and the actual toy, the head is known as Lord Zarak, so I'm glad they at least found a way to write that in, because like I think the Rebirth doesn't, maybe the Rebirth does call him Lord Zarak at some point, I can't remember, but yeah, at least in this continuity they found a way to shoehorn that in, even though they don't have the whole like Nebulos angle that everything else goes with.
Quick sidebar then, because I'm not aware, because I haven't delved as much into the comics as you have, but is that sort of a general continuity canon thing, that the head of Scorponok is called Lord Zarak?
Yes, yeah, because he is like him and like Cerebros are kind of the two leaders of like the two factions on Nebulos, and yeah, like Zarak is the sort of fascist ruler, if you like, of kind of the main sort of city there. So yeah, he is the lord of it. So yeah, he is like Lord Zarak certainly in the comics. And then yeah, I'm pretty sure in the toy he is likewise, like, the head is known as Lord Zarak.
Oh, there we go. Well, before we move on to the next episode, good sir, any additional notes you've got that you would like to impart on everybody?
No, I don't think so. Let's see who this Immortal Emperor is that is going to return.
It is time, folks. Episode 16, Return of the Immortal Emperor. We begin with the narrator saying the following. The devious Scorponok's Decepticon army has blown up Mars. It has turned the history of the universe on its head, upsetting the planetary balance. A terrifying incident. Quote. As while this is being said, we the viewer see the planet being blown up once again, and basically they're reinforcing, Andy, despite what the TF Wiki just said, this is a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I feel like this whole bit is actually quite good at finding a good explanation for why, especially given how sort of, yeah, like the fallout is a little bit of a damp squib in the previous episode. This almost feels like it tries to make good on that of like, oh no, really, this is really important and here's why.
To emphasize that further, in the aftermath of the destruction, we see that RC and Spike are on board Broadside for his random every so often cameo appearance, surveying the field of rubble that remains from where the planet was, attempting to discern what effects the loss of the planet has had on the solar system. They report back to Autobot base on Athenia and say that the damage done is just within safety limits. Whatever the heck that means.
Yeah, I imagine there's some like health and safety person that's just like, you know, got some kind of gauge of like, no, this is a safe planet explosion, like only just, but it's within the parameters. It's like asbestos warnings or something. It's like, no, this is within the government regulated allowance for destroyed planet in your solar system. So you know you're not going to get any compensation.
But RC is very clear to point out almost immediately, quote unquote, it's on the verge of becoming dangerous. It's like, sure, okay, whatever. But Spike adds, but what if another planet is destroyed under these circumstances? Fortress responds with, it would mean the destruction of the universe. We can't allow that.
Like, all right, you drama queen. It's just like, it's not just like, yeah, it would really suck. It's like, no, the entire universe will be destroyed. It's like, but will it though? I mean, we've lost 2 planets in like a few weeks, and it seems to be holding together pretty well at the moment. So I think you might be over-egging it a bit there.
And then Chromedome randomly throws in the line throughout this conversation. The Decepticons have become more cunning since Galvatron disappeared.
Not wrong.
Then we see that Fortress and the Headmasters have now become determined to keep track of the Decepticon movements before any further planets could potentially fall victim to their antics. As they talk, we then cut outside to a pond where Wheelie and Daniel have the following conversation. Daniel saying, quote, are you saying the Decepticons are stronger? Wheelie responds, no, but it's dangerous even for our commanders if they're not careful. Daniel, have you seen Scorponok and Fortress fight? Wheelie, of course not. I heard Chromedome talking about it. Daniel, then you have no right to talk. I bet Fortress is stronger. End quote. Then just shoves Wheelie into the pond. And then starts going, ha ha ha, what a weakling you are, Wheelie.
I mean, to be fair, yeah, like, you know, you're a robot. You're a big hulking, like, you know, made of metal person, and just some little kid has just pushed you in a pond. I think Daniel actually has a point here. I did enjoy this a lot. It did make me wish that, as somebody who has, like, you know, the wheelie that comes with the Transformers Studio 86 line, now I feel like I need the Daniel just so that I can recreate this iconic moment for myself in some sort of small puddle. But no, it was... We all wanted to be Daniel in that moment, so as much as I throw shade at him, we salute you.
That was one for the diehard fans there, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
All those years of rhyming couplets and whatnot.
Yeah. It's, all of your pretending not to like parties. This is what it's come to.
Getting drunk on Energon. But suddenly, amongst this, I wrote down chaos, but stupidity, I'll call it instead. Their argument immediately kind of just gets forgotten about, because, as the TF Wiki very appropriately describes it, Andy, a mysterious iridescent globe of light swoops down out of the sky, sprays water everywhere, flies low over the lake, narrowly missing Daniel and Wheelie and nearby buildings, and then just vanishes into the sky. We come to find out that the Headmasters have since departed to monitor the Decepticons' movements, as mentioned earlier. Fortress receives a report of Daniel and Wheelie's mysterious UFO sighting. RC says, quote unquote, "We don't know if it's hostile or friendly, but there's no damage on Athenia." So,
yeah,
cool.
The only thing that matters. I can't remember if it's this shot or another one where, like, it's RC says something and then it cuts to a shot of Spike and he just doesn't say anything.
Yeah,
he's just like, I don't know. I have nothing to contribute here.
Spike's equivalent of just going, "Yep, true."
Yeah, or just like, yeah, whatever.
Fortress immediately thinks this is the work of the Decepticons and tells Athenia base to remain on high alert. A conversation then begins with Brainstorm and Highbrow on the bridge about whether they are actually doing enough just by monitoring the Decepticon activities. Something that has actually kind of been echoed in past episodes as well. Chromedome specifically, if I remember, Andy, kind of saying it a few episodes back where he was like, "Why don't we just go and attack them?" But Fortress being like, no, this is what we do. Yeah. Control yourself, child.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this has, as much as we just talked about, like, how super competent and powerful the Decepticons have seemed in this series, like, the Autobots have been pretty not really at the races for a lot of this. Like, they've seemed pretty incompetent. There's been quite a bit of kind of arguing and infighting. I mean, Daniel just pushed someone in a pond. That's all I'm saying. But, you know, they've not really put their best foot forward on a lot of this. And so, yeah, it's kind of, it is kind of a real turnaround, because it does feel like the Autobots are the ones maybe not doing all that they could be here.
At this point, Fortress realises while having this conversation that neither Chromedome or Hardhead are on the bridge. And I think he's told that they both went back to their rooms, and he starts looking on internal cameras, but they're nowhere to be seen. Unless you'd have looked in the cargo bay, where they're both transformed in vehicle mode, blending in with other vehicles on the ship. Which begs the question, Andy. Why are there other vehicles in the cargo bay of Battleship Maximus?
Yeah, I mean, who can say? Maybe that's where Jazz is hanging out now. Maybe it's Jazz. I don't know.
It just looked like a bog standard Jeep, but there you go. I mean, maybe it was Prowl. There you go.
Say maybe it was Hound if it's a Jeep.
Hound, that's what I meant. Sorry. Wrong. Oops, my bad, everyone. It's been a while since I've had to think about them, all right? But anyway, back to the story. In an attempt to be proactive, the pair decide to sneak out, quote-unquote, of Battleship Maximus. This despite the fact that Fortress and everyone else picks them up on the radar. And apparently they're heading, to Char to attack the Decepticons. What can possibly go wrong, Andy?
Yeah, I mean, even like as much as I kind of, and again, this is not the first time we've had this in Transformers where someone's like, well, I'm just going to go and attack them by myself. But yeah, this, especially given the events of recent episodes, it's like, this seems like a really bad decision, whichever way you spin it. So I don't know quite what's going on here.
Now, quick point of reference, folks, that remember, based on the last episode now, Zarak, from this point forward, we are to understand, is now just strictly known as Scorponok, so that is how I am intending to call him, unless there is a specific note or something else reference that is otherwise detailed. The narrator says, Scorponok has received new information from Counterpunch. He is now aware of the Headmaster's movements and is keeping Weirdwolf on battle alert. End quote. I like the fact, quick sidebar, Andy, that we got to see Counterpunch, because I want to say we've not seen Counterpunch for a very long time at this point.
I feel
Maybe even as early back as episode 5 or so?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it might even have been earlier than that. But yeah, it was definitely pretty early on in the series. We kind of got our introduction to Punch/Counterpunch's whole deal. Which, again, seems like a thing that you'd want to play with quite a lot as a writer on this series, because it's a really fun premise. But yeah, he's just been kind of forgotten about, and he's been rolled out for this one.
Yeah, and for those of you who perhaps needed a quick refresher on Counterpunch/Punch, it's sort of the double agent transformer, if you will. Sort of transforms into a different colour scheme to sort of act upon which version he is being. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We begin to see various Decepticons on Char, keeping an eye out for whatever may be coming their way, both inside and outside, which leads to a fun moment, Andy, where I can't remember if this has happened before in Headmasters at this point, but Ravage starts speaking, also sounds like he smoked 40 a day for quite a while, and then suddenly Laserbeak starts responding, and it's seemingly something to do with the fact that there's intel being given not through them, and they're a bit jealous of it.
Yeah, I mean, my only note here is like Ravage and Laserbeak are talking. I don't like it because it's like, I mean, how many episodes of the show have we had with these characters, you know, not talking? Ravage just growls and snarls a bit. Laserbeak just squawks. That's it. That's all you get. I can't. This is like the whole like, should Legos talk argument of just like, no, this is not like canonically they just make animal sounds. Like why are they talking? Not here for this.
All I'm gonna say is I don't know if there is a note about it in the TF Wiki notes. I've not looked. I dread to think what these two voices may have sounded like in the dub.
Probably not like all the others are not particularly good.
Part of me really wants Ravish to just sound like a really upmarket English gentleman. I don't know why, but that's the vision I've got now, so I'm sticking to it.
Anything is possible.
Although they are able to pass sort of the one lonely sort of patrolling Decepticon, if you will, around the perimeter of the planet, that being Blitzwing, the two Autobots sort of hide behind some nearby asteroid debris, if you will, to be able to get closer to planet Char. But they are completely unaware of the fact that Scorponok already knows their movements and that they're about to be ambushed. This is why they've been allowed to get as close to the planet as they have. Scorponok transforms into Scorpion mode and carries the Decepticon Headmasters into space, where they handily defeat Chromedome and Hardhead. They're sort of spinning them all around the place. There's a cool moment, I think, where I don't remember which Decepticon Headmaster it was. It may have been Blitzwing actually, but I think it was Chromedome was hanging on to like the air fins of one of the Decepticons and was just going around in a circle. Really, really cool. And then they just get thrown into Scorponok's path, who just swats them away with his giant scorpion claw. And they just get sent away. It was just a really cool visual of what was going on.
Yeah, it was pretty kind of comedic, cartoony stuff, but also pretty effective. But also, like, I mean, yeah, Chromedome grabs onto Blitzwing's kind of fins, and then, like, Hardhead basically says, maybe you should let go. And he says, like, I can't even if I wanted to, which kind of suggests that he's actually having a good time of just like, no, this is pretty cool, actually. This is a good funfair ride. I'm here for this.
That or Blitzwing, excuse me, has got secret magnetic ability.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm also not sure why he couldn't let go, but...
So it turns out as well that the two Autobots are sent hurtling into space, and they just conveniently collide with Battleship Maximus.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is probably a thing for the Transformers bingo card. If like two characters, you know, in the infinite vastness of space somehow like run into each other. I mean, what episode? Was it like a late season 2 or late season 3 episode where Starscream's just like sent hurtling into space and just happens to like bump into like Megatron or something, and it's just like
for some reason I thought it was Shockwave, but it can't have been because Shockwave wasn't in season 3.
Yeah, well, unless it was a season 2 thing. I can't remember where it was. I just remember it being a kind of like, you know, Starscream is tumbling through space forever and just happens to hit another Decepticon in, the entire universe. It's like, what are the chances?
I do remember the reference you're making. I just can't put off the top of my head which episode it is.
Yeah, no, I can't remember that. It was a long while ago.
If you'd like to find out, everybody, you can figure it out by listening to the episodes in our podcast archive. How's that for a challenge? I digress. Back to the story. We then see Scorponok and Battleship Maximus collide. Scorponok first grabbing Maximus with its claws, almost at one point, Andy, I thought, giving it a nice massage, but it wasn't. Before transforming into robot mode and just pummeling Battleship Maximus. It is noted through dialogue at this point that the Master Sword can't be used because, surprise, surprise, Andy, there isn't enough energy and Maximus needs to recharge.
Yeah, I mean, they had enough energy from an entire planet blowing up, but I'm not sure I'm quite buying that because, we've very quickly gone from like, oh, wow, now I have all this energy I can take off, and now it's like, oh, I've used it already. It's like, you're not very fuel efficient. Like, what's how many miles per gallon do you get, Fortress? Because it doesn't seem great.
I don't know why I'm even going to try and attempt to defend Fortress here. But what if it's because the tech is so old they've not been able to update it and it's still stuck on, like, Planet Master tech from 4 million years ago?
Yeah, I mean, clearly, yeah, it's suboptimal at best. But man. Like,
why did I even defend that? I'm just going to attempt to carry on now. So, this battle is unfolding when suddenly the strange glowing UFO reappears over their heads. And the distraction sort of causes the Decepticons to be, what the heck is going on? The Autobots are able to escape. But the Decepticons are puzzled over what this mysterious object is, as it once again disappears out of sight. Now, during all of this, we've had a couple of sort of interstitial scenes, but back on Char, we get a bit more now when it comes to the whole Ravage Laserbeak thing that we saw, because Sound Blaster, as the TF Wiki put it, receives an unhappy report from Ravage and Laserbeak on how Counterpunch has been showing them up by finding out information that they couldn't. Sound Blaster's response is effectively just, well, do better.
Yeah, get good.
But ends up taking all of his cassette tapes to Earth, to the Autobot base, as it were, in the hopes of digging up some new information. Actually, they're going to the Decepticon base, in the hopes of digging up some new information and improve their standing in the Decepticon Empire. Now, unfortunately, Andy, what they didn't count on when Sound Blaster arrived, was the UFO reappearing, and then it sort of going towards Six Shot, enveloping him in the kaleidoscope colory light, and disappearing. And Sound Blaster kind of being like, wait, what? Sort of not knowing what to think.
This whole plot point is really kind of confusing because it's never really explicitly explained any of what's happening here. We'll come to kind of like the end point for this, but it all seemed very random and not really, I don't know, and not helped by the fact that like this happens and then Soundwave just like trips over a rock and like falls over himself like 3 times in like quick succession, which is just
so great.
It's just one of these shows really weird, like, oh, we need a slapstick moment somewhere, or I guess we'll just put it in here, which completely deflects from the fact that this weird UFO thing that's flying around has basically abducted Six Shot, which seems like it should be important, but it's like, no, look at the robot man fall over, and it's like, okay, I don't know how to process any of this, to be honest.
So, interesting sidebar thought here. At this point, I mean, obviously, you kind of know where it's gradually going based on the title card of the episode and what the visual was. But if you didn't know, my first thought probably would have been, is this Rodimus coming back? I mean, because it's kind of, mainly because it's at that point of, well, Rodimus went away. It's kind of a logical thing that if there's an unidentified flying object, it might be something to do with that.
Yeah, it would also make sense that Rodimus returns, the first thing he sees is Daniel pushing Wheelie into a pond, and then just like, I am done with this, I am out of here. So yeah, it would all come together perfectly.
I hadn't thought of it like that, actually. That's really funny. I will say that a fun dialogue note was just before the bright UFO engulfed Six Shot. I did like his one line of dialogue towards the UFO being, "I am Six Shot, the ninja consultant to the Decepticons."
Yeah, I mean, this episode has a couple of moments that are really obvious, like product placement. Basically, that felt like one of them. Of just like, I know we've introduced this guy a few times, but we should really remind everyone that he's a ninja. You know, I'm surprised they didn't get him to go through all of his transformation modes before he got kidnapped as well, just to polish things off.
I just want to see his business card saying "Ninja Consultant to the Decepticons."
Yeah. I mean, it's just made in crayon or something. It's like, no, really, I'm a ninja, you know.
As the Autobot headmasters return to Athenia, Daniel has come up with an idea, Andy. Because you see, he's watched some movies in his time, and he's decided that aliens respond to sound. Now, no, this is not a cue for Sound Blaster, everyone. I'm just going to say that now. What he has decided is he will get an Autobot branded keyboard and play the same few notes over and over and over and over again in an attempt to communicate with the aliens.
Yeah, now I'm not sure how many repetitions it took for me to write this. It might have been 2, but I just wrote in all caps, "Please make Daniel stop playing this tune." Because it was just incessant. It just kept coming back, and then it would go away to some other scene and you'd cut back to Daniel and he's still playing the goddamn tune. And it's like, somebody please just take this off him and just make this stop, because this is just the worst. I can't bear this for like more than 2 minutes.
To highlight a couple of random things that occurred as Daniel was playing this, other Autobots are arriving in the area. We get to see Chromedome and RC driving next to each other, where Chromedome starts flirting with RC, kind of saying, "Oh, I get to drive alongside RC, and oh, I get to see a beautiful lady transformer transform."
Yeah,
like,
the genuine question there, like, is that sexy? Like, is Transformers, if you're a Transformer and you see another Transformer transforming, are you just like, whew? You know,
he was pretty taken aback by it, it's got to be said.
He was, and I've never really thought about it in a sexual way before, and I hopefully never will again. But I'm like, is that a thing? Is that like, you know, is that what like transformhub.com is kind of all about?
Transform Hub.
Of just like, oh, look at the transformation, look at that. You can see everything. And like, I don't know, that really kind of intrigued and tickled me, of just like, this is just like, because, you know, transforming is what Transformers do. They do it all the time. It seems like it wouldn't be something that would be that alluring. And I'm thinking about this way too much and I should stop. But it's just like, I don't know, that just really sat with me. It's just like, that's a strange thing to say, it feels like.
I mean, let's just say this is what happens when Daniel is playing the same 4 or 5 notes over and over.
I mean, yes, to be fair, I also lost quite a lot of my sanity while that was happening, so...
Another thing that happened is that Fortress is discussing with a couple of the other Autobots about, like, could the UFO be friendly or foe? Maybe it's the work of the Decepticons. We should go and find out what the Decepticons are doing. And Daniel says something to the effect of, "Shh, I'm trying to play."
Yeah, I'm trying to summon the UFO, and it's like, well, just don't. Just, I mean, really, if this felt like a perfect point for a moment of symmetry, of just like wheelie pushing Daniel into the pond with his goddamn keyboard, and just be like, stop. No more.
The part that really puts a nice bow on this scene, though, Andy, is when Daniel is still playing. The scene fades to black. It comes back up immediately. Daniel is still playing. Nothing's happened. And he just goes head down and gives up.
Yeah, finally. I mean, to be fair, I feel like this is actually a really good bit of comedy writing, because I feel like this is very much a deliberate, like, this is dumb and annoying, and we're going to do it just long enough to annoy everyone, and then we will make it stop. So it did amuse me greatly, but it's like, oh man, this is the worst possible, like, take on Close Encounters of the Third Kind that you could have imagined.
A little later in the story, Fortress is led by Twincast to meet the Autobots' new informant, Counterpunch, aka Punch, who steps out from the shadows with his gun drawn, but he's just fooling around, and he reveals his true form, referred to actually in the dialogue, Andy, as Space Punch, but it's actually just Punch.
Yeah, I was like, how do we make him sound even cooler? Like, just put space in front of it. But also, like, he just randomly transforms into his vehicle mode and back, which was the other, like, this is a kind of trying to sell the toy moment of just, like, I feel like there's a note from Hasbro here saying, make sure you show his vehicle form. And it's like, we don't have any scene where it makes sense to have his vehicle form. So someone's just like, just have him transform and transform back again. Or maybe he was trying to be sexy. Maybe he was just like, hey, check this out.
Hey, Commander Fortress.
Yeah. Do you want to see something? Yeah. See that single line has just ruined Transformers for me forever. Because now, anytime I see any transformation, I'm just gonna be like, is that? I don't know. Like, I mean, what about the big Unicron transformation in the movie? No, I'm gonna stop.
Every time you hear that transformation sound, it's ruined.
Yeah, exactly. My entire childhood is just scarred for life now.
It's taken 39 podcasts, everyone, but finally.
Yeah, I don't want to do this anymore.
So, Punch explains to Fortress that the Decepticons are active on Earth's moon, where they are planning to hold a ceremony where Scorponok will be coronated as the new Decepticon Emperor. We then cut to what it is referred to by the on-screen text, Andy, as the Sea of Silence, the moon. And then more specifically, we cut to kind of a building structure, which is referred to in all caps as Moon Stadium.
Yeah, which, I mean, is very good, a very good name. I assume what that translation should have been is like the Sea of Tranquility, but
That's what I thought as well.
Very literal with it. Also, what is it with, like, the Decepticons, like, having their, like, coronation ceremonies on just, like, random planets? Because I'm pretty sure in the movie, like, I don't know where they go for, like, Starscream's coronation, but that's just, like, some random place. I don't think they go back to Cybertron for that, do they?
You know what? I'm going to find out while you carry on speaking.
Maybe they do, because it does look quite Cybertronian, but I feel like it... Yeah, maybe it was Cybertron. I don't know, but yeah, I either way, I did like that. This felt like it was going to be a callback to the movie of just like, you know, who interrupts my coronation. I'm almost disappointed that this wasn't where our Immortal Emperor appeared directly to interrupt kind of Zarak getting, you know, given the leadership of the Decepticons, because I'm like, oh, this would be a really good mirror to the film of just like Galvatron just wrecks everybody's coronation.
Per the TF Wiki recap of the movie, Galvatron first stops at Cybertron to take his revenge by killing Starscream and reclaiming his leadership.
It is Cybertron. It makes sense. But yeah, I was never quite sure whether it was actually on Cybertron or just like other random planet. But I mean, they did have control of Cybertron at that time, so why not? But clearly now they have Moon Stadium. And now they've blown up Cybertron. I guess they've got to do it somewhere. This is like the neutral stadium.
But I also like the fact that it was a stadium just with like lots of Decepticon branding on it. Like the actual the sand in the middle of the stadium has a giant Decepticon emblem on it as well. It's just unmistakably Decepticon. It
is actually pretty cool. And again, as we know, Decepticons very fast builders. Like they probably just knocked that up in like half an hour of just like, oh, okay, we need a coronation stadium. Cool, we can do that.
We then see Cyclonus appear for the first time in the episode, and he then says, Decepticons, civilians, and military personnel, the grand ceremony for our Emperor, Commander Scorponok, will soon commence. To which my first thought, Andy, is, what counts as a Decepticon civilian?
Yeah, I had that thought as well, because, yeah, we've not met any Decepticon that's not, like, in active service, so that does also beg a question.
We then cut to a higher point in the stadium, where a spotlight shines on a particular silhouette, and of course, it is Scorponok, aka Zarak, but obviously, it's the Zarak bit if you are the Lord Zarak bit, he's Scorponok. And he says, I am the new Decepticon Emperor, Scorponok. Behold the Earth, as he points to the sky behind him. I will destroy Fortress and the Autobot base on Earth with my own hands. And we get the equivalent of a very energetic golf clap by the Decepticons. When no sooner are those words spoken, then Battleship Maximus appears, as do the train bots, and it feels like an epic battle is about to begin. In your we've got to sell lots of toys this episode moment, the Autobots deploy the Headmasters, the Aerial Bots who combine, the Protector Bots who combine, and the Technobots who combine, all ready for the battle ahead. There's a really random moment involving the Headmasters, Andy, which I don't know if you caught, but they were kind of running in like a little pack as a group together towards the Decepticon Headmasters, and their heads were just spinning around each other's bodies.
Yeah, well, I think the intimation of that was that it was like a distraction tactic as they charged the Decepticon Headmasters, because they were just like, what the heck, why are you doing the head swap thing like really fast like that? And then they just kind of get chinned basically, which it was both funny and like, well, it worked, it was quite effective, so I kind of liked it. I was also thinking like, have we had an episode where we've had all the Autobot combiner teams in one place, combined at one time? Like, I feel like we've never had anything where we've had the Aerial Bots, the Protector Bots, and the Technobots all combined together. This feels like a first to me.
Now you mention it, not all of them like this, I don't think. We've had maybe two of them in the same place.
Yeah, it's like we've had like Aerial Bots and Protector Bots together before, and maybe like Protector Bots and Technobots, but I feel like having all three in one hit, and plus
technically the train bots as well, now you mention it.
Yeah, and plus the train bots as well to add into that. It's like it was quite a kind of delightful, just kind of like, oh yeah, this is big news. This is all the combiners all together.
By the way, the reason I mentioned sort of the head-on distraction technique from the Headmasters was because the narrator told us apparently that they were powering up, and then that sort of led to the first jumping high karate kick by Chromedome.
I mean, yeah, but maybe. I mean, the Headmasters keep introducing new things that they can do when it's convenient to them. So who am I to question?
But we didn't get to see the tech spec, so we don't know if it was more powerful or not.
Yeah, that was the thing, because I sort of had that moment as well of like, well, maybe it's going to show them all like powered up to full because they've switched them all so many times that it's broken the connector. Because I'm surprised they didn't put a like, don't try this at home, kids, because you're probably going to break all of your Headmasters. But yeah, I know, clearly maybe it's too powerful even for the tech specs on their chests.
So we've got a whole bunch of Decepticons sort of fighting the Autobot combiners, more in just like a big laser battle. Battleship Maximus is taking on Scorponok as well during this. There is a heck of a lot of action going on. We see Scorponok transform into its giant robot mode, continuing its attack on Battleship Maximus. When then suddenly, the unidentified flying object appears. The kaleidoscope of colour. The could it be Rodimus thing. It appears in the sky. Everyone stops. And then Sound Blaster arrives to try and inform Scorponok of what he has learned. And suddenly, the UFO fires laser beams and it hits the Autobots. It's attacking them left, right, and center. And then Sixshot steps out of a light emanated from the UFO. Much to all of the Decepticons' surprise, he simply says, "What's wrong? Have you forgotten what I look like?" Which I thought was pretty cool, actually, because remember the episode earlier in the season where it was like him in 6 continents at once type thing?
Yes.
It was kind of a little callback to that in a way.
Yeah, I mean, whether that's deliberate or not is another question entirely, but sure. Yeah, I know, that was just a very confusing end to that whole thing, because I don't really understand why Sixshot was kidnapped. Because I thought it was going to be a kind of like Starscream's ghosty kind of affair of like, the Immortal Emperor who's about to appear needed a body to use, but it's just like, no, he just appears and then the actual character appears. So like, I don't know. Like, did he just want someone to talk to while he was driving to the moon? Like, maybe he just wanted someone to have a chat with. Who can say?
I mean, maybe he's been updated as to what's been going on. In the Decepticons recently.
And I mean, Six Shot would be pretty good for that, I guess. It's like I need someone to show me all of your transformations while we're traveling, because I hear you've got lots of them.
Then the kaleidoscope of color dims, and its source is revealed to in fact be a UFO spacecraft. Then a purple beam of light is projected onto the ground, to the surface, if you will. And then a familiar figure appears from the light. It's Galvatron. And his first words are simply, "Are you surprised?"
It's like, yes, we are.
To emphasize that, Andy, both Autobots and Decepticons just react with total shock. But the reappearance of their leader suddenly gives the Decepticons sort of like a second wind, if you will. And Galvatron just basically goes, "What are you waiting for? Attack them!" And the Decepticons do that. They overpower the Autobots. So much so that the Autobots are kind of on the verge of just having to retreat, and they end up doing so. And quietly incensed by the fact that this has happened, much to his chagrin, we then get the following dialogue exchange between Scorponok and Galvatron. Scorponok saying to himself, "That Galvatron should return now of all things." Galvatron says, "It seems you can't govern yourselves when I'm not around, Scorponok." Scorponok says, "At least we're making an effort." Galvatron says, "Am I not welcome back?" Scorponok says, "What are you saying? Lord Galvatron, why didn't you show yourself sooner?" Galvatron says, "I was observing. I wanted to see what had happened in my absence. I saw a lot. It seems everything is ready." And Scorponok then says, in fact, it's Scourge that then chimes in and goes, "In fact, we were waiting for your return." Then Galvatron proceeds to actually, at this point, commend Scorponok for the strides that he has made in leading the Decepticons in his absence. But then very quickly makes it clear, that's done now, I'm back and I'm in charge. Then we get sort of the full sort of coronation ceremony, if you will, where Galvatron is officially re-inducted? What's the word, Andy? Recoronated?
Yeah, sure. Recoronated. Let's go with that.
Yeah, recoronated as leader, as the Autobots observe from their very, very good webcam on Athenia. But at this point, Andy, perhaps a very big note of the episode happens. Daniel, once again realizing, for like the second time in like 3 episodes, he's been tricked by the Decepticons. In a fit of rage, throws down his keyboard. It smashes into pieces. Then he runs from the room, more angry at himself than anything, and simply just shouts, "I hate UFOs!"
I mean, a great line. I might also have cheered when he smashed the keyboard, to be quite honest. It's like, yes, thank God.
And then he runs out the room, and Wheelie goes to catch up with his buddy, to try and soothe his tempers, as the TF Wiki put it. But once again, Galvatron is back. And with that, the narrator concludes the episode by saying the following. "The Emperor of Darkness, Galvatron, is alive. This will make the Decepticon army more fiendish. Autobot army, you must fight them. We must not allow evil to triumph." And then we get the really cheesy outro sequence every time.
Yeah, we do.
Mate, I enjoyed this episode. This was good. It in a way, it's really annoying that the payoff was spoiled with the title card, but I really liked the build-up and sort of the mystery and intrigue factor about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, the whole UFO side of it is kind of slightly weird, and I I suspect we're not going to get any explanation. I don't know. Maybe we will get an explanation to where Galvatron has actually been. Because, like, yes, I'm sure you've been observing, but, like, why are you hanging out in a UFO? Why were you flying around watching Daniel pushing Wheelie into a puddle? Like, you know, I have many questions which may or may not be answered. But yeah, the payoff is great. I do really like that sort of back and forth between Galvatron and Zarak, where they're both kind of like needling each other a little bit. I mean, Zarak's, at least we tried, seems like you're kind of underselling yourself. You literally blew up 2 planets, you know, in the time since Galvatron kind of disappeared. But, you know, and of course, you know, that's the interesting sort of subtext of this, is we kind of know that, you know, Zarak blowing up Cybertron and Galvatron being involved with that was kind of all part of his plan. Like, we assume Galvatron also knows that. So, like, you know, how is this whole relationship gonna play out? Like, it's this very sort of awkward truce at this point in time. So it sets up some really juicy stuff. And obviously, like, for the Autobots, it's like now 2 malevolent leaders versus, you know, Ultra Magnus, which is, you know, not necessarily not you've not got your full strength first 11 there to kind of try and fight off whatever's coming next.
So I think it's time we delve into the TF Wiki, Andy, and perhaps we'll get some clues as to where we're going from here, or maybe we'll get a few questions answered. So, first of all, Andy, a quote just to make you relive this horror moment. The TF Wiki has noted the exact quote that Chromedome gave when driving around RC, as it were. Quote, "It's an honor to drive with a woman, and I even get to see her transform."
Yeah, I mean, I'm never gonna think. I'm gonna expunge this episode from my memory just for my own sake, I think, at this point.
Continuity notes. It's taken a while for the other cassettes to catch up to Ratback, who first spoke in the Great Cassette Operation episode. But beginning with this episode, this is ominous, Ravage and Laserbeak are heard to clearly speak in their animal forms. I am concerned, Andy, it says beginning with this episode.
Yeah, I mean, I assume this is going to be a thing. It's also, I realise, a very weird sort of line in the sand on my point that I don't have a problem that Ratback can talk now, which again, I think this also comes down, I've talked about this before, like in the comic continuity where Ratbat, like, there are periods where he becomes like Autobot leader, imagine, where he becomes Decepticon leader, like, de facto for a while, because he is like super smart and he can talk. But yeah, like Ravage and Laserbeak is a different matter entirely.
This episode continues the running joke of Chromedome having something of a crush on RC, which we first got a hint of when the Statue of Liberty's look was compared to RC's in Terror, the Six Shadows. The big lug got up the courage to ask her for a dance in the Shadow Emperor Zarak episode, and here he's just happy for a chance to drive alongside her, as well as to, watch her transform. Kinky, says the TF Wiki. Galvatron met his apparent end in Cybertron is in Grave Danger Part 2. How he survived an explosion capable of destroying a planet, and where he acquired the ship he has in this episode are never explained.
Well, fine. We just have to make up our own backstory then.
Zarak professed to know where Galvatron was and to have been appointed leader in Galvatron's absence. That happened in the episode, the Shadow Emperor Zarak episode. It was clear to the audience that he was lying from the outset, but although this episode makes his deception publicly obvious, he doesn't actually suffer any repercussions from it. Well, Galvatron basically turns him... wait, what? Galvatron basically turns him into a bus for the next episode straight, so that for the next 8 episodes straight, so that counts. What?
Well, I guess this is where the planet hopping comes in. I guess Zarek's just going to be taxi service for those episodes. But again, I mean, I don't dislike that as part of this like uneasy truce between them of just like, Galvatron knows what Zarak's been doing. Zarak knows that Galvatron knows, and so is not going to admit to any of this. So it's like, you know, where does their relationship go from here? So yeah, I don't dislike that part specifically. That feels like that's kind of engineered as part of this whole plot line.
Real-world references. The movie that Daniel picked up the musical communication trick from is a... Do you know which movie, Andy?
Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
Correct. 2 points. Continuity errors. Daniel and Wheelie want to make contact with aliens while the other Autobots and Spike state that there is no such thing as an alien. But the giant green shape-shifting alien robot from outer space. Now, it's not an alien robot, Andy, what the TF... Well, the TF Wiki links to an alien robot page, but I simply would have said the plant creature from 2 episodes ago.
Yeah. I mean, also, from Daniel's point of view, the Transformers. Like... You know, they are from another planet. De facto, they are aliens to him. But, yeah, I digress.
Oh, that really got me, sorry. We don't see the Earth Defense Command in the course of the Headmasters, but you have to wonder what sort of condition they are in, given that they apparently didn't notice or stop the Decepticons building a giant stadium in the Sea of Tranquility. That correlates your thought there, Andy. It's not even subtle. There's a massive Decepticon symbol in the centre. And that's actually a really good point. Where is the Earth Defense Command at this point? Where is Marissa Fairborn?
I did think that as well, of just like, yeah, I mean... I kind of like the brazenness of it from the Decepticon point of view of like basically it's kind of like setting up your stall like right outside your opponent's house of just like, hey, look at us, look what we've done. So yeah, I know it seems like a very Zarak thing to do, so I'll at least give them that. And again, as mentioned, they can build it in like 20 minutes because we know the Decepticons build stuff fast, so you know, maybe they didn't even have time to notice. Maybe it was during the day at the Earth Defense Force headquarters, so they just couldn't see the moon.
Here's a fun note. It says superhuman and Spike is crossed out and now says Daniel. Daniel is able to fully shove a well-balanced wheelie into the pond on Athenia. And then, when throwing his final paddy, Daniel utterly crushes his synthesizer by walking over it.
Yeah, like father, like son. I mean, think of some of the stuff that Spike did. I mean, he threw hounds one time. I mean, you know, he did some stuff.
Trivia note. With the wrapping up of its major running plot points in the previous episode, the Headmasters took a 5-week break before it returned to Japanese TV screens with this new installment.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting because there is such a direct follow-on. I mean, like I said at the top, like this almost, you could look at it as a 3-parter because this almost felt like part 3 because, you know, no sooner had, you know, Mars blown up, we were straight on to the next bit. So, yeah, it both makes sense to me that that's where you take a break after the whole Mars thing and, you know, the reveal of Scorponok. But also, this episode didn't feel like a sort of straight back from a 5-week break kind of episode.
It might also make sense as to why there were just so many Transformers included. It's like, kids, toys. You must buy toys. Here's every toy available.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that side does make sense. But yeah, especially given as it sounds like we're going in a different direction for a while, this feels like this would be a good, like, story arc culmination of a, like, hard stop for a break. But clearly not.
Foreign localization. The Omni Productions English dub title of the episode, Andy, was The Indestructible King Galvatron.
I mean, even more of a giveaway, really.
The Shout Factory subtitle... Okay, so the Shout Factory subtitle title of the episode, God, that was a difficult thing to say, is simply The Return of Galvatron.
Okay.
But the menu describes it as being Return of the Immortal Emperor. And apparently, the Decepticon Earth base is subtitled as Planet Earth Decepticon Command.
Okay, so somebody was clearly having a bad day when they wrote that, because that doesn't work on any number of levels.
It sounds like it should be a spin-off show.
Yeah, I mean, that's your kind of like Shattered Glass kind of continuity going on right there.
So, the Metrodome subtitles, this is the version that we were watching, obviously. The Metrodome sub is no stranger to the odd mistake, usually with names, but in this episode, they say it's particularly poorly translated. Sound Blaster's conversations with the cassette is rendered nigh on incomprehensible, while there is frequent awkward phrasing of characters just being on territory.
Yeah, it did stand out
It
to
was
me as
weird.
well.
That's why I just summed it up the way that I did when I recapped it.
Yeah, there were definitely some bits where it's like, I'm not entirely sure what this was actually meant to be, because it doesn't scan at all.
Yeah, I mean, just from the way that I mean, admitting we didn't point it out when watching it, but I do remember just thinking, well, Ravage and Laserbeak are clearly annoyed at Counterpunch, and he's like an informant type thing, so I'm guessing he just did something better than them. That's sort of how I put 2 and 2 together.
Yeah, but no, it was definitely like, because it's been pretty well subtitled up to this point, like it was a very definite dropping quality for whatever reason, so...
The Russian title for this episode was The Invincible Galvatron. The Italian title was The Immortal Emperor is Back.
Okay, that sounds like a boxing promo.
And in Mandarin, it is The Return of Galvatron, the Emperor of Destruction.
Okay, that's pretty good. Mind you, I mean, he's done a lot less destruction than Zarak, so that's actually overstating his claim, to be honest.
It's an interesting thing, Andy, because technically, Zarak has done far more destruction than Galvatron, and Galvatron's done a fair amount.
yeah, for sure.
But there we go, good sir. That wraps up that episode. So do you have any additional notes you would like to impart before we begin to wrap up today's show?
No, I just continue to reiterate Ravage shouldn't talk. That's all. That's all I have to add to the discussion at this point. I feel like I've spoiled myself as well, because I looked ahead to what the titles are for the next 2 episodes, and I wish I'd done it cold, because one of these episodes really interests me greatly, that we'll be covering on the next show.
Well, you just mentioned it. Next time on the program, we will be discussing episodes 17 and 18 of Transformers Headmasters, with the following episode titles: SOS from Planet Sandra, which I'm going to assume is pronounced something different in Japanese.
Well, is it though? I mean, I don't know. That feels like this should be like some kind of sitcom or something. But we'll see what Planet Sandra has to offer, I guess.
And then the episode after is, oh my god, Daniel faces his biggest crisis ever.
Yeah. It's like, I mean, the mind boggles, to be honest, given the crises that he's already had in this show. Like, what could be worse than anything that he's been subjected to over the course of the G1 continuity? So I am very excited to see what that's all about.
Given that everything Daniel has gone through in this show so far, what the heck could it be?
Yeah, I'm genuinely excited about that. So,
and folks, you will find out what that is in 2 weeks' time, because that is when our next episode will be available. That's 2 weeks from the time we publish the episode. So do make sure you stay tuned. If you've enjoyed the show, please tell a friend. We'd really appreciate it. And once again, if you want to check out our podcast in video form, we do every single episode on YouTube. You can find every single show that we have recorded archived on there. We've also got a Patreon page. We don't charge any money for it. It's simply a long-term audio archive solution. Simply go to patreon.com/starscreamsghost and you'll find us on there just fine. If you want to follow us on social media, you can do so on Instagram and Twitter under the usernames @starscreamspod. Andy, before we go, any other closing thoughts for today?
No. I mean, I there are things I don't want to think about from these episodes, so I'm not going to think any more about anything that I've just seen.
Yeah. Chromedome, what the heck are you? Well,
yeah.
Aside from being a Transformer, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about the direction of travel of this whole plot line, so we'll see where that goes, if anywhere.
I mean, hopefully we don't.
I mean, yeah, I would be quite happy to not, but it's been too much of an ongoing thing. Like, I feel like we're gonna get a Chromedome RC very awkward episode at some point.
Yeah, it seems to be like an every 4 or 5 episode thing, though. It's not like every single episode it happens. At least it's fairly infrequent.
Yeah. But if we're getting into sort of a little bit more kind of fillery territory, then all bets are off. I mean, maybe this is like Daniel's worst moment. Who knows? Maybe this is going to be all our nightmares come to pass.
He discovers Transformers Hub.
Yeah, exactly.
Folks, thank you very much for listening and or watching. From myself, Jeremy Grace, from him, Mr. Andy Hanley, we've been Starscream's Ghost, a Transformers podcast. Until next time, talk to you soon.
Bye, everyone.